have an esteemed guest amongst us who is well known for his high profile network across the MENA region and for his active involvement in various sectors such as healthcare, education, real estate business, and F&B. He is none other than Mr. Basim Abu Daga, the co-founder of Astor Global Partners. On the behalf of Amity University, Dubai, I would like to welcome you, sir. And now I would like to hand over you to enlighten us about yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Maimuna. Thank you, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me to come to Amity University. It's always a thrill to come and meet the future of the business world and people that will be graduating into the world of business. So thank you for that short brief. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I started my career as an engineer, so I graduated as a mechanical engineer. And after spending 9 years in the industry, I worked between two different countries in Kuwait and where I was born, and then went off to Canada, where I lived there and was very lucky to have walked into almost every industry that's out there. As a mechanical engineer, this was a heaven for me. Getting into pulp and paper industry, I walked into Cadbury Flakes. Thank you, Cadbury Flake, the manufacturing facility. There's a very famous soup company called Campbell's Soup, if you guys are familiar with it. I was also part of that, got into that, pulp and paper, as I mentioned, nickel mines, copper mines, nuclear power plants, steel mills. So as an engineer, this was heaven for me because I'm going into all these locations. I'm really learning a lot about the manufacturing and the world and the engineering world. So that was super exciting. Spent 9 years of that in my life, and then I decided to come back to the region. So came back with the same company that I was working with in Canada. So I came back, moved along to the region, spent around 6 months here, and decided, you know what, it's mainly oil and gas, and there's a bit of manufacturing here, but a bit of industrial engineering. But I felt that my heart was leaving the engineering world. So I took the courageous step after doing quite a bit of soul thinking and you know. And I decided to basically move off, get away from engineering. So I did my first career move when I got into the lovely world of real estate and investments. If any of you were around here in 2004 and 5, you'll remember that Dubai was really thriving in terms of the real estate world. So it was jumping in deep into an industry that was going crazy. The energy, the growth. This was when the freehold of real estate started being implemented out here, and foreigners were allowed to invest in Dubai. And so when I got into that, it was the most exciting part because it was just a nascent industry that was developing really fast. And I was very lucky to have worked with a developer, and then with a broker, with an advisor, with investments, and then managed to go through the whole cycle of real estate. And until today, I've got a small part of my business that's still associated with real estate. So I still have a soft spot for real estate, like I have a soft spot for mechanical engineering. But somewhere in 2008 and 9, the world of real estate and investment slowed down dramatically in this part of the world, just actually across the globe. And for me, it was a chance to go after my further education. So I went and did an executive MBA through London Business School. And that was an eye-opener because I've been wanting to do my executive MBA for many years. The last chance I got, I was able to pick between doing an MBA in York University in Canada. The TAs went on strike. So I'm like, so that's fate, you know, I'm not, you know, destined to do my MBA. And that was 10 years before, or actually 6 years before I finally got around to doing my executive MBA. But then that was also a huge change in the way I think and in terms of what I learned and the people, my classmates, and the network that I developed within class in the region and the travels that were also taking place. So within my executive MBA session there, or 2-year program, I also learned a lot from my colleagues and from the world of finance and strategy, as well as there was a big focus on entrepreneurship. So within that, I started thinking again, did lots of soul searching again. Remember, one of my classes was super funny. The professor walks in, and he's like, he dims the lights and he gives us all popcorn. And we're like, what? You know, who wants salted? Who wants caramel, right? I'll take a mix of both. And we sat there, and he's like, listen, this is the end of your career, your path in the MBA program, and we wanted you to take a look at this short skit in the movie. So he made us watch a movie, and it was basically about life after work. So a person that was had just finished and retired, and just as everyone was celebrating around him, and he was celebrating his retirement, he was telling himself, what did I do in my life? Why am I still here? Why is this? You know, I've spent all my life, all my career doing something I never liked, and working with people I really didn't appreciate as much, and now I'm in a situation where, you know, I'm forced to retire. So my whole youth and life went in front of me, ahead of me, and now I've got all the time and money, and I don't know what to do with myself. So it was very interesting because he switched the lights on very quickly to say, all right, you guys, you know, you think you know it all, you think you have the best networks in the world, you think you're young and that's it, you know, you've got all the energy, you've got all the knowledge from one of the best universities in the world, you've got a great network and all that. But if you don't put that into use, doing something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, then, oh well, good luck. And so this is where it hit like half the class, everybody was staring to open space because a lot of us realized that we were just doing stuff we weren't too passionate about. So somewhere there I decided to actively seek what works best for me, and then I decided that I loved private equity investments and advisory. So then I started going through the long journey of applying to different companies, and I realized that it might be easier because of my network and of what I wanted to get into it myself. So I got into a partnership with a gentleman in the boutique private equity advisory business. And so we started advising basically on healthcare, education. Of course, real estate was always the backbone, and the F&B space. And just within these three sectors, the focus was phenomenal because I got to learn more about these three sectors. So while I'm an engineer by trade and got into real estate with my first career move, and then I decided that it's real estate and investments, and then we got into private equity. So that was kind of another career move, but then very quickly it was very focused towards education and healthcare and the F&B space. And then we were advising so much on and this is a private equity, it's a form of investments which is very specialized. So while we're advising a lot on the educational space, we found that there was a niche and there was an opportunity to get into this business. So we got in, we set up a company that was, and raised the capital in the company, and we brought in the shareholders, and we brought in an operator. We signed up with one of the best operators around the world, and we brought them in locally. We took on the franchise rights to the region. We also sub-franchised it. And then after that, a couple of years later, we exited the business. So that was an interesting exit. And our franchisees actually running with the operator, with the whole operations today, and I think they're doing a fantastic job out of that. A few years after that, I've continued advising on the healthcare space. And when I say advising, we're getting into businesses and owners and we're understanding the challenges of the sector, and we're working with them to help them either raise the capital that they might need, or the investments, or look for partnerships, or all that. So that was a very unique investment sort of model that, again, as I mentioned earlier, in the business of private equity. So from there, we saw another opportunity within the healthcare space, and so we came together with a group of the group of founders and operator, and we raised some capital. We brought in some investors. We set up a new company, and this company, the Healthcare Network, which was an exciting approach, a very unique and entrepreneurial approach to resolving some of the biggest challenges in the healthcare space, and specifically dealing with the smaller clinics and healthcare providers who needed to corporatize their business. They were just operating like a mom and pop or a single operator, single owner model, and now they needed to be able to compete with all the big boys, all the big players that were actively taking up a lot of the advertising space, and were very professional in doing all the services. They were very large in scale, so it was hard for them for the smaller players to compete against the big boys. So we came in, we started consolidating these clinics, offering them management services and consulting services to improve their efficiency, their performance, We started working with them on their back office, centralizing all their back office operations so that they can only focus on what they do best, which is the clinical part. And then by offering them all these services in the back office, we were improving efficiencies in different ways, and therefore they're becoming a bit more competitive. The plan was, and we're still sort of in it right now, is to put them all under one platform and then create a very large firm that has a very large operator, healthcare operator that has a substantial value for each owner of these polyclinics. So that was it. Not yet. That was part of the scope. In the meantime, I was also involved with another group that was advising on family businesses and family investments and strategies. So that was with Aster Global Partners, which is another company that I've co-founded with some shareholders. And in that was the exciting world of being involved with the families, the older, the families that have been first generation, second generation, and third generation in some cases of businesses and families that have been originally the whole heart and soul of the trading and the economies of the region. And we worked with them on advising them on different strategies and plans, and that's another exciting path that I've also been involved with. So as you can see, I wear quite a few hats. I realize that it's more exciting for me to continue to be learning and creating value and contributing to businesses and people within various areas. And fortunately, having been lucky to have got into all these different sectors and industries and knowing quite a few people, and been fortunate to have had some good education in the process, it allows me to really maximize my reach. So I feel that I was able to add more value to my life and my professional life and my career, and also more importantly, pursuing a passion that I have, which is making a change and creating and leaving a bit of a small sort of dot as a footprint, just before I go off to somewhere more exciting, I guess, I hope. But so that's kind of the story. And on the side, like there's a side left, all the sides have already been taken up. But on the side, I've also been part of a prop tech. So I came together with a gentleman from Abu Dhabi who's a pioneer in real estate investments, and he had a concept, an idea, and he's like, Bassem, let's try to do this. So it was very exciting. We got into that, and that's when you get into a startup, I'm sure if there's a few startups around the table, you'll know how much time and energy and that soaks you up. And I've also been exploring another startup in the edutech space as well. So prop tech, edutech. I looked at health tech just because it was fun and exciting, and we ended up doing a lot in the health tech space. But we always kind of knew that this was a beautiful concept of a startup that's probably never going to go anywhere. But we just kept trying to work with it and massage it. It's still in the back of our minds, but not as active with my co-founders as much as we wanted to on that. It's kind of one of those coffee sessions that just kept dragging on for months and months in hopes that a company or a business will be established that will revolutionize the healthcare space. So that's me in a nutshell. When I'm bored and I have time, I love scuba diving. And I love actually taking my two daughters, Jen and Talia, underwater. So they've had their first stint in the underwater world, and they realized that, we can, we've traveled here, we've been there. But when you go underwater, that's a big percentage of our globe, our universe, our planet, and they realized how tiny they were as well now. So now they realize that there's a lot for them to learn and do. And that's basically my life in a nutshell. It's lovely to be here. I just thought I'd give you a bit of a snapshot about my life and my career, more importantly, and maybe get the chance to hear from you on some of your startups. And actually, if you have any questions, I know you've all been maybe interested in maybe bits and pieces of this journey that I've had. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll continue to shoot out more about them. Yeah.
Sure. So you mentioned that you have been involved with a lot of sectors, including F&B, healthcare, education, and real estate.
Yes.
So why not retail? Because there's a major part of Dubai and everything is the retail space.
A good point. I mean, I think when I started thinking about where I want to go in my life and what I want to do that's exciting and passionate, I realized that in the educational space and the healthcare space, I can contribute to society in different ways. Yeah. You're helping people that need education, which is important, critical. You're also working with people that need healthcare. So these are kind of the foundations of any society. You need to have proper healthcare and education. Those are the areas that I found my passion in. And since then, these are the areas that I'm focusing on. There's 1,000,001 other sectors to look at, but unfortunately, I'm trying to stick to these because, as you see, I haven't done enough in my life. And if I get into dragged into even more sectors to explore, I probably, would just sort of become really not very. I wouldn't get a chance to be knowledgeable or build any expertise in these.
Yeah.
So while I've been fortunate to have done a lot. After I left the engineering world, it's been focused on 3 sectors. Not that they're little, but at least it gives me a good understanding of these sectors and an ability to really make a change and make a difference in these areas. So limited scope. Maybe if I can clone myself somehow, or have a disciple, my kids, I'll get each kid to do something and hear something. They seem to be interested in other stuff at this point in their lives. Yeah, so that answers retail.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of retail, to be honest, either.
Okay,
That's my
I
wife's
wanted
department.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, why would you choose the Gulf region for startups rather than using Canada instead?
Very good point. Very good question. So startups there's room for entrepreneurship everywhere on this planet, even in places that have no limited resources. And certainly Canada's always been on the back of my mind. I mean, that's home for me. I'm Palestinian descent, but born in Kuwait and Canadian, living in Dubai. So that's just a standard story for many of us traveling on this planet, on this journey. Canada is probably a better place in terms of finding the technology and the aspects and the startup world to even scale up relatively fast. You've got the U.S. as your on the southern border that has a massive economy. But just like there's opportunities there with technology, with healthcare, with education, the areas that I've been focusing on, you've got similar size of markets here. So if you're developing a new startup for this region, there's not as much competition that there is probably in North America, and then B, there's I understand this region very well, and I understand the challenges and the needs quite well, and so we're navigating and working within our networks and our investors and our abilities to create something that's of substance and significance out here. And I've also realized that, like the prop tech that we're working on, it wasn't really a new concept. It was a concept that's been flourishing in the West, specifically in North America. And that prop tech's been doing really well out there. We brought the same concept, but we have to localize it. And there's a lot of localization that's necessary. You just don't bring in technology or ideas from the West and just implement them here, but they have to localize them. So that was an area that I was working on. And you see that sometimes a startup does not necessarily mean that you're bringing something that's completely new, but sometimes it's bringing something completely new to a region and localizing it and working with it. So if it's been working well in the West, then the odds are it's going to work well out here. And having been based out here and loving Dubai and loving living out here in the region, and speaking the language as well, I think it allows me to really, maybe have a better chance at success out here.
But would you like to explore some other country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my heart's in Canada, and my soul's in Palestine, and my body's in Dubai. So if there's anywhere to reunite all three somewhere, I'd be delighted to bring in, the best. And it's not that, it's making a change and difference as far as you can go. So it doesn't reflect on a specific geography or jurisdiction, but it actually, it's the essence of the places that you know more than the place that you don't know, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, guys? Thoughts of?
I wanted to ask you, you enjoy exploring the underworld, right? And the underwater worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any opinion about the amount of plastic that's been, polluting the waters over here? Do you have any opinion on that?
Absolutely, that's a very good question. While I'm, if you've got any connection with the underwater world, the first thing that comes to mind is the environment and how, what the humans are doing to it, basically. Because I mean, I was fortunate to have started diving in 1996. That was my 95 actually. That was my first dive. And when I dove, I remember the first couple of spots that I used to dive, and since then I've been an avid diver. The reefs and the underwater world was just incredible, fascinating. It's just so much beautiful underwater life. And as I progressed and continued to dive in similar spots or the same spots, I could see the reef and the numbers of fish are dwindling. The coral is also no longer as colorful. Could be a global warming effect, but certainly with the impact of humanity on the oceans, it's been quite dramatic, and I've been seeing it. Some of the spots that we were diving, one of my last dives was in Borneo, and we were diving very close to what could have been one of the most beautiful islands out there, but there was so much garbage and trash in the waters. It was just sickening, unfortunately, and it was because of that specific area. There was no ability to recycle and do stuff. And so when you go underwater, you see the effect. Even the fish look different. I'm not sure if that's because of the plastic that they've been chewing on or whatever. But yeah, it's a very unfortunate circumstance. So wherever we get a chance, I take my daughters out to the reef cleanups out here and everywhere else to start constantly trying to clean the oceans and the beaches from whatever trash that we plastic, whatever we see.
And you've also been involved with the education field a lot over here, right?
Yeah.
And I personally think it's very, very expensive over here if you look at the education, the fees and all that. So what would be your opinion on that?
So in many cases, LBS was a very expensive program. So meaning that you can't put a price tag on the education in some cases. Now, it certainly could be a little bit more expensive for some schools as opposed to others. There's a wide range of schools. I think there's over 120 something different schools in Dubai for high schools or K-12s, and there's probably maybe 60 to 70 universities in Dubai. So you've got a bit of a choice, which is fantastic. You're not sort of locked in between 2 or 3 operators or schools or whatever. And it sort of goes where your heart is. I mean, I was sitting on a board of a school that had fees of around 3,000-4,000 dirhams a year. And okay, yes, the quality of education was as good as you could get for that sort of price tag, because you weren't able to train the teachers and get the best teachers. But certainly there's a certain standard of education that is delivered there, which was acceptable or above as per KHDA standards. Now, it is expensive to run schools, and you'll realize when you dig into them that if you want quality, you really end up paying for it. So if you want the best teachers and the best principals and the best operators and staff and bus conductors and you name it in a school or a university, you expect to pay quite a bit more for that. Maybe it is a little bit more expensive than the average private schools in other countries, but there's certainly some schools that are a little bit more affordable as well. So, yeah.
It's okay, you can ask.
So as experts going around, you've heard there's a big dive-in real estate.
Yeah.
So do you think it's going to come back up, or is going to...
Okay, so real estate's a cycle. It's constantly going up and round. This cycle is dragged. Actually, this one's been really short, but then when there's a downside, it takes up a while for population to come in and absorb it. So depending on how quickly the new population or new residents come to Dubai and they start absorbing all these real estates that have been developed, the odds are that that's when the pricing starts going up, and again the demand builds and all that. Now Dubai is very is one of the most open and advanced governments that are constantly thinking about ways to improve the standard of living out here and the requirements of professionals. So what they've there's always a drive, and we're always seeing new people coming in. And I get involved with a lot of conferences where I end up speaking or chairing a panel, And with these, every time I'm sitting and talking to these people, newcomers that are coming to Dubai, they're like, this is beautiful, this is great, I want to live here, I want to have a second house, I want to do this. So it constantly appeals to people coming in. They've done a fantastic marketing, and actually they developed, the government of Dubai has developed, the leadership of Dubai have developed a fascinating city here that really appeals to many people. It's just a matter of time that they absorb, hopefully it's real estate, and continually grow with as a city and as a nation as well.
And how do you think the Expo 2020 will raise the job market in Dubai?
Yeah, good question. So I think there was initially it was all about Expo 2020, 2020, whatever. I realized that there was, very quickly, there's a lot of conversations happening about the legacy of Expo 2020, which was quite impressive because we were barely getting to know what Expo 2020 was. Never mind, what's this legacy business? So apparently, it's to ensure that there is a growth and a natural progression after the expo. So it's not just an event that comes in, people come in, you get all these these booths and these stalls built, and then all of a sudden everyone disappears. And it was like any big event that people come back, they're all sort of in a big daze. What happened? So certainly there's a lot of uniqueness that's coming to Dubai's Expo because you're getting not conventional jobs, so you're not looking at getting the standard engineering, medical, marketing, whatever. So now you're looking at the Expo, or each nation bringing out its best is a bit of a competition. It's a bit of a signal to the job markets and even and mainly the businesses out here that this is what the competitive landscape is going to look like, which means that this is what the expectations will be moving forward. So if you're in a sector that's slowing down or dwindling or dying, and you go in and you see everything's been converted to apps or to different technological advancements, then you realize, oh, I got to up my level, up my game, which means that I got to reach out to people that understand this, which also means that there's going to be a shift from some of the traditional conventional employees or jobs to something that's a lot more, I'd say, fascinating would be the word, but hopefully exciting as well with it. So there will be a shift to new types of jobs that are being created, and it's just natural. Who of you have heard about artificial intelligence, or data miners, or these jobs did not exist like 3-4 years ago? It's like, what is this? Some sci-fi stuff, in this part of the world. And now today, you're getting these advertisements, co-founder with artificial intelligence background, data miner expert, I don't know, you're not getting a lot of shawarma, no offense to anybody, of course, that's a real job and it needs it, but then even that technology will come in to somehow alleviate the pressures of the job itself to make it an easier job, I hope, or more efficient job. So so certainly the job market will have an impact. There will be a lot of impact on the type of jobs, the number of jobs, and the range of businesses that are coming in. So I see to 2020 being an exciting year for Dubai because a lot of entities will come in here, and because of what I've seen in the past, I know that many of them would love to continue with the legacy and live out here and enjoy living in Dubai.
So that means it's going to reduce the manpower and make stuff automated?
Not necessarily. There's always a job for everybody. I think. I was talking to a good friend of mine. She owns a psychology clinic, and she's like, "We're gonna have a lot of business coming forwards." So you can't automate a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? So well, actually, maybe you can. I don't know, but not yet. So there's certainly some jobs will continually be in demand. Other jobs naturally will need to be obsolete. If you think of your great-grandparents' days, they were probably having different jobs than what are we looking at today. I sent my first email in 1991, and I remember, I was like, what's going on? And I got a reply 2 days later from a friend in California, like, oh my days, this is going to transform the world. Back then, just a year before, it was sending letters. We were writing letters to each other. So I was going to the post office to deposit a letter and put a stamp on it. And I remember it's like, so imagine emails versus you were, professionally writing letters back then. So anyway, the world will continue to transform, and so will jobs. So you guys got to be ready for it.
Okay, I've got two questions.
Yeah.
The travel and tourism department, the industry might have a boost up with the introduction of 2020 Expo 2020, but I'm not really sure about the rest of the industries.
Yeah.
And second question is, with the introduction of AI,
Yeah.
wouldn't it negatively affect the job market and the employment status of people?
I mean, some sectors, yes. Probably, I'll start with the second question. Some sectors in some areas, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that a friend of mine, for example, he does a traffic study. He does traffic studies. So part of a traffic study is to sit there at a corner of a busy intersection and count cars. That's part of the job. You got to count the cars, see how busy this is in rush hour and whatever. See, you get 100 cars at this, whatever.
What types of vehicles and stuff?
Sorry?
What types of vehicles?
Yeah, what type of vehicles and all that. So I'm thinking, this job needs to be automated. There must be some counter that can do this instead of a physical human being sitting at an intersection trying to count cars. So there will be a bit of a shift in the types of jobs. There could be some jobs that will go obsolete, and many of the more conventional types of jobs, if you're a paper pusher type of job, that's probably going to disappear, in my eyes. But I think if you're a professional, you're a very specialized expert, you'll continue to have your demand, and the more focused and specialized you become in a specific area, because you're focused and specialized, you'll know that you're competing against the machine, and you want to find your niche so that you're not going to be replaced by that machine. So that's where it starts. You can't be, sitting in a job not knowing what your competition is or what the sector is. So you'll realize that I'm going to be obsolete. So you got to pivot and change into something that, will continuously give you a job, and that's the nature of any job. You're constantly elevating and learning more and progressing and learning something different and changing your scope. So you're not just going to continue to do the same job, I hope, for the next 20 years or so. So that's the first part. The second part about tourism in Dubai, and that being a focus, I guess that was the. So yes, certainly Dubai has a lot of attraction for people out here, tourists. So it will be a main driver. Although again, the leadership out here have been constantly diversifying the economy. So it does not only rely on tourism. So it's not like one of the touristy islands that just does nothing except come in and learn. Just come in and enjoy your stay in Dubai. No, Dubai has more to offer, and it's got a lot of different sectors and industries that people will get into. So tourism is one of the drivers, but it's not the only one.
You said you are an investor for startups also.
Yeah.
So I was asking, like, what all other matrices, like we know the matrices like marketing and all this. Other than what things will you be looking when you go to like invest in a startup, or when they're coming to us for investment?
So sometimes investing is in kind. So not necessarily you're coming in to put in just hard cash. I feel that if I can add more value to a startup, that's where I get excited. So I've been looking at the edutech, for example. I love technology. I hate technology. No, I have to deal with technology. I'm not an IT guru, or most of what I learned in continuation discussion, most of the software that we learned in school has become obsolete like 5 years later. So whether it was DOS programming or whether it's Fortran, these things don't exist anymore. Not that I know of, at least. But so anyway, going back, so I'm in education. So I love specific sectors, education. And so I love education. Within education, I've got lots of networks. So sometimes by coming into a startup, I can add a lot more value than just money. So in money, you just sort of come in, you give a seed the investment, or you do an angel investment, and that's kind of limited. But no, I feel that the value that I bring into the table is usually more, and I need to bring in more value than money, because money's limited. But if you come in and do and grow an operation from a specific size and go 10 times more just within contracts and networks, and that's much more valuable than money, and that's what the entrepreneurs would be looking for. So that's the area that I enjoy more than, and again, I've got limited pockets. I need to win a lottery or something at some point so I can invest further. But fortunately my network's pretty sizable, so sometimes I bring in co-investors with me.
Seed funding is very important for a startup in the early stages.
Yeah.
So, where do you think the founder should be looking at for an optimum investor, like who has the industry knowledge, who has the money, who wants to give you the time and is really interested in your business?
That's a fantastic question. Fantastic question, Thurman, right?
Yeah.
For any startup, I think, and that's been my experience for the last couple of years, when you're just looking for money and you haven't yet been able to prove a model, or you're not close to it, or you don't have enough skin in the game where you show and you reflect to the investor that you've done all this and you've had lots of sweat, tears, and blood coming out, that shows how much you put into the startup, and you've gone as far as you can with your limited resources to generate revenues. I think that's the key. If you've gone as far as you possibly can to start showing that you're able to generate revenues, that's when investors will say, you know what, I'm in, I like this guy more, or this girl, more than the deal itself. So today investors are investing in the entrepreneur themselves. They're not only specifically in a transaction, because I've seen it. So my favorite one was this one guy working with him for 3.5 months, very keen on taking over a startup and investing in a startup, and me and a co-investor were looking at, and we thought this was phenomenal. This guy knew everything. He was a star. He's been working on it for a year and change, and we love the startup. And we're tweaking it, looking at financials, looking at growth, looking at revenue streams, looking at development, all that stuff. And then I get a random email coming from him just as we were kind of dwindling our interest and discussing and challenging him further. He says, "Oh, by the way, while we're looking at the startup, now that we know each other, because I've emphasized how I think he's a very, very intelligent person. He's like, while we're looking at startups, if you think that someone might be looking for my skill set, then please let me know and I'll just take on the job." So I'm thinking, you know what? So I'm investing all my money and time in the startup, and then I get this guy to just say, "Oh, you know what? I'm bored, or I found something better. I'll just see you guys later." And you're like, you get stuck with a project that you're like, what am I doing? So it's effectively start investing in a startup, and it's effectively investing in a startup and an entrepreneur. Sorry, investing in the entrepreneur, not the startup, and investing in an entrepreneur that has gone so far and as far as he could to demonstrate that he could generate revenues. So and someone, I love these guys that come to me, or girls that come in, they're like, "I've got a great idea." I'm like, "Yeah, really? Yeah." It's like, "Oh, I want to do this and this and this," and I've developed a 10-slide presentation, and I think this is going to be the next unicorn or rhinoceros or whatever you want to call it. And then I'm like, "Great, and what have you done since?" Like, "Well, nothing. I've just gone to I just hang out at the beach and go out with my friends and do this and that, and whatever they're doing is not associated with startups, so they're not even showing they have any interest in this." And then when they're dining in fancy restaurants and they're sitting at having a lavish lifestyle, but they've got this beautiful concept of a startup. So I'm thinking this is not something that I would invest in, because they haven't gone far enough to see if someone's going to pay for this service or this product that they're developing, and then B, they don't seem to be really interested. So very good question, and I think a lot of, for those of you that are trying to set up their own companies, demonstrate that you are able to generate revenue, and then demonstrate that it's scalable. So these two things are, and that it's growing fast. Once you hit that hockey stick or the growth path, I think that's gold. Investors will start chasing you instead of you saying, "Oh, please give me money." And then again, the other part is, once you're looking to raise the money, don't come and say, "I need all the money up front." Just take enough money that will get you through that particular phase, so that you can start going to the next phase. I need 20,000 dirhams to develop this or do that, or start being able to generate revenues, and for that 20,000 dirhams, I'm going to give you 2% or 3% or 5% or whatever, a small percentage. Sometimes an entrepreneur will say, "Oh, this is 50,000 dirhams, that's a lot of money, so I'll just give 70% of my company away," and then they realize that they could have generated, and they would generate profits beyond millions later. And so with 30%, they're not excited anymore to do this.
This is also another question, like when you approach investors, how do you value your business if it's in a pre-launch stage or a pre-registration stage?
Good question. I think there's a lot of different ways to value a business, depending on what industry, what sector you're in. But certainly the growth path is the first part, and then I would usually do a future cash flow analysis, which is, I don't know, for the people that are studying finance maybe or accounting, yeah. So you'll see that. So that's one way to do the evaluation. The other areas would be to see how quickly it's growing. So if it's scalable from month on month, then you could potentially wait a little bit so valuation changes. And then at the end of the day, to be honest, it's all in the eye of the beholder, of the investor. So the investor can come in and say, "Oh, I love this concept. I'll put in as much money and whatever valuation, because it's just magic." Or many times the investor is going to say, "You know what? Okay, I see your valuation's X, but I think your business plan, your projections, and your forecasts say that you'll probably meet X, but I don't see value in it. It's not attractive for me in whatever way, so I don't like it. I don't see it's very doable or whatever for whatever reason." So you'll see that valuation is there's industry multiples, there's which are also helpful. But it's mainly the appetite of the investors out there. So meaning that you price your value, do your valuation exercise, and then you analyze, you understand the interest of your investors, and then you basically and that's how I would do it. You put your price tag accordingly, or your valuation accordingly.
So for tech-enabled businesses or startups, the curve of growth is usually unexpected. You could just go famous in the blink of an eye, or you could just be very stagnant. So in those kind of businesses, how do you value yourself, through cash flows?
So if there's cash that's being generated, absolutely, that's the first area that I'd look at. But if they're before cash being generated, you see the adoption rate. If the adoption rate's going fast and the acceleration is relatively fast month on month, then there's an indication of potential better valuation than if it's a slower pace. So as per the big plan, the forecast again, if your projections are quite aggressive, and the performance has also been reflecting that. So for the past 3 or 4 months, you've seen that same growth. Then that's usually a good sign. That's when you can earn a better valuation.
So, according to you, which type of quality should we develop for being a successful CEO or being a successful co-founder like you?
Okay, so I appreciate the fact that that you see that, but anyway, we're all trying to leave our print or mark in this place. But so what's fascinating is you cannot, Steve Jobs says you cannot connect your dots moving forwards. You look back and you see it, but it's the steps that you're taking. So there's certain skills that you need to be developing constantly all throughout your life, and part of them is networking and talking to people. I think the more you talk to people, the more you learn from people, and then the more you understand the challenges, and the more you identify problems, and the more you say, "Hey, you know what? I can solve that problem," or I know someone that can solve this problem. And that's essentially how my life started. So I was thinking, and I met all these brilliant people. I'm like, wow, and that's the best part of it. I always try to meet brilliant people. So you meet some brilliant people, and Tarun, for example, would have a problem that, so would have a knowledge that Nishal was looking at some challenge in life, and I'm like, you know what, have you met Nishal, or have you met Tarun? No? Okay, let me introduce you to my friends. And by that, you're seeing that you're actually starting to where your thinking have to resolve problems. And by resolving problems and challenges, that's effectively growing in one way or another, whether it's a startup, whether it's a career, whether it's whatever it is. And so the ability to resolve problems, the communication and constant discussions with people that are smarter than yourself, and the ability to listen to what the challenges and problems and that are being thrown at you, and then try to make sense out of it through through your friends and peers and people around you. So those are kind of, I think, the main components of a successful CEO, whether I fit that or not, that's another discussion. But certainly, these are some of the thoughts that I have.
What was the biggest achievement in your mechanical engineering career, or like the very fascinating thing in your mechanical engineering career?
Okay, so there's one story I love, and again, just off the top of my mind, because there's not many fascinating careers. But this was a story where my boss in Canada said, and I lived in Toronto, Ontario, and he's like, Bassem, I think you've been, I really appreciate, or something. I'm not sure if it was appreciation or promotion or demotion, but he's like, I would like to let you manage another territory next to us, and it's called Manitoba. And in that province, there's potential chances. So I'm like, all right, that's very exciting, super excited. He's giving me in my eyes, it was a bit of a promotion. And so I decided, yes, that's awesome, going to Manitoba. And for those of you that know Canada, Manitoba is kind of in the middle of nowhere, if that makes sense. But the area that I ended up flying to was in the Arctic Circle. So I'm going into the Arctic Circle for business. I'm super excited. I've got my promotion to run another territory, because it was not just South Central Ontario, it was also getting Manitoba, and it was twice the size, or whatever, like 10 times the size of the territory that I was running. So I was super excited, And I went out there, and then as soon as I land, I'm asking people where my hotel is, and they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, you just drive into the town and you can't miss it. I'm like, oof, wow, so the town was so tiny. And there was just one building there, and that was the hotel. Literally like one of these old movies. And as I was driving into this town, it was minus 25 degrees Celsius. And I was freezing, even within the car, I was feeling the heat within the freezing weather. And as I get into the hotel, and the reception is looking at me, and you see these old shabby little saloons that from the 18th century, thinking to myself, did this guy really give me a promotion, or was this was a demotion, or kind of get out there and I don't want to see you ever again? So anyway, fortunately enough, I ended up conducting business and deals out there, and little did I know that after many years, that the business that I developed in these places, in Manitoba specifically, actually there were mines, lots of mines, nickel and copper mines, and pulp and paper industry became one of the key arteries or key channels of revenues for our company. And it was even many years after I left that my boss was telling me, but remember when I sent you to Manitoba? Remember Manitoba? Of course, how could I ever forget it? I still remember it 20 years later, and I'm still shivering from the cold there. And just those, and he's like, well, that's become one of our major partners in terms of doing business and working with them on the engineering front. So that was, a fun story that I continuously, and going in there not knowing what to expect, it was one of those, shooting in the complete dark. And that's why my boss apparently sent me, because he had a feeling that I'd go in and uncover stuff that many people had tried before and couldn't. Anyway, it's luck, but then as Ian Braff would always say, you create your luck. So you gotta be there to be, to get lucky. So that was just one of those.
Very nice.
So since you're an investor, I would like to ask you a question. How can we, like a common layman, invest in such investment opportunities that we know will give us good return? Like not really huge investments, but some, investment that will earn us some good return.
Okay, I don't know how many millions you're planning on investing, but it's important that you create an investment strategy and a plan, which means that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So if you've got 10 million dirhams to invest, don't put them all into one startup or one project. You have to diversify, put some and break it up into 4 or 5 different areas. So, if one sector is one area doesn't make money, then the others will. But if you have a budget that you plan on investing, I think at your early years for everyone, you can probably take a little bit more risk. Meaning that, because you're not getting, I hope none of you are retiring anytime soon. No? Okay. So since you've got a way to go to retirement, I would encourage you to take a little bit more risk, meaning go after projects or investments that are a little bit riskier, because you can make bigger returns. And of course, it's got to be calculated risk, not just crazy risk, like invest in some, my business that just doesn't make sense. But meaning go after the riskiest investments are usually starting up a business or a startup or a concept, because they just come out from the blue. And this is where what we're discussing here. So it kind of, I would allocate some of your investments to startups or new companies that you think that make sense. Because the other part that's important, I think, is failing. So it's important that you either fail as a startup, as an entrepreneur, or as an investor. And the earlier that you do it, the more you learn. You learn not to do it again.
Yep.
You don't want to be investing in startups at, just before retirement and then realizing that these things don't work. But so that the earlier, the sooner you start doing stuff, whatever it is, it's investments or starting up companies, and failing or interacting with people that failed, you learn a lot from them. Because if you're constantly successful, you're not learning as much as the people that have failed.
So back in 2008, you told there was the whole economy, the whole globe was kind of under recession,
Yeah.
and real estate was not doing well. So do you think now in UAE, is it a good opportunity to invest in real estate in particular?
Good point. So in 2008, as the world collapsed with
Yes.
their financial markets, 2009 was where the start of real estate's recovery was taking place in Dubai, and we were making a lot of money for us and for investors, because that's when just the real estate prices fell off the cliff. Now today in the real estate market, the prices have certainly dropped dramatically from where they were. So there's a very good sign, very good indication that you're probably near the end. But I don't have the crystal ball to see if we're there. But by closely networking and talking to people and investors and people that are within the real estate world, you start seeing closely where the trend is going. If the trend is starting to bottom down, meaning that that's it. There's not much talk about, or there's not as many people selling as people buying, then you probably feel that the trend is going to start going up, and that's when you hit it at the bottom. Now, if you are able to time that, please give me a call, because I'd be delighted to jump on that same bandwagon. But certainly by keeping a close eye on the field, on the real estate sector in the field, you'll start seeing where we're at. If the trend's constantly going down, or if it's kind of starting to bottom out. And then when it's close to that, that's when you can probably start being a bit more aggressive in real estate, and if you want to invest in it.
Okay, so from the story, I saw that you became quite a lot of things like CEO, co-founder, engineer. So the career was changing, but is there anything that's constant in all the story?
Well, the constant thing was whenever I felt trapped by a psychotic boss or by a boring job, I needed to make a change. So it's like, all right, I had to break out of that. So I wasn't in, again, it's personality. Some people will be doing the same thing for 20, 30 years, and good for them. But in my case, I wasn't able to. I felt time is very precious. So if I'm stuck in a specific role, a job, it's something I'm not passionate about, I don't feel that I'm adding value, I'm not contributing to humanity, to life, to myself, to anybody, I needed to jump off that boat. And that's partly where my enthusiasm continues to build around any new project or concept. And when it's not developed or it's not getting in any direction, I just try to move on to the next, opportunity. And that's where I recommend the constant is enthusiasm towards your job or what you're doing. If you've lost that passion, enthusiasm, then you got to get out of there as quickly as you can.
Nice.
So yeah.
So I think we're towards the end of the session. So I would like to express our warm gratitude from Amity University, Dubai. Thank you for coming here and sharing an experience. And I think we all got a good answers to our doubts. And thank you so much. I would hope you would come here again.
Sure, welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and it was fun and exciting to meet you all and hear a little bit about what you're up to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't get a chance to hear more about your startups now. So give me your snapshot. Give me 30-second elevator pitches.
So for modest stressors who are tired of the hassles of Modest Fashion Shopping. The Modest Look is a tech-enabled virtual retail store that is working towards providing a really unique and new experience to modest dressers online.
Interesting. What? How is it unique?
So we have an AI-enabled personal stylist that will be assisting the customers in making a purchase, and she's gonna basically ask a bunch of few simple questions like what colors do you like, what patterns do you like, what brands do you like, and all of that, and she's gonna then present outfits to her. And we also have a virtual fitting room, what we call the e-fitting room.
Okay.
So during our research, we found out that most of the people stay away from online shopping because of the uncertainty of it. Some people
Yeah.
prefer loose, some people prefer fit. And if you have gone through online shopping websites, you see that the size guides don't really speak a lot. So what we have is an AI-enabled e-fitting room where we actually put all the material compositions of the specific product, and it checks, according to your height and weight, what fits you best, and it pre-selects everything on the website.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we are trying to collaborate with a lot of fashion brands to bring their brands on board, so the customers also have a confidence in making a purchase, because we are an authentic brand and we are bringing in known brands on the platform, and we are promoting it through influencers and social media marketing.
Oh, okay. Very good. Good stuff. Okay, and Vamsi.
Yeah, so it's Uniters. Basically, it's an online-based platform connecting tutors and students.
Okay.
Here, the tutors are just only university students, and they can teach. It's not just academics. They can teach dance, music, sports, personal.
Dance.
Yeah.
Okay.
They
Oh,
can.
okay.
Yeah. It's online thing, so they can teach personal training, professional skills.
Wow. Okay. I think
So
I've heard of something similar though out there, if I'm not mistaken. Right? But just check. I think if you do some search, somebody tried this a while ago, but it wasn't university focused.
Okay.
But I think, and I don't know how far.
So the
it went.
main thing is giving part-time jobs to university students.
okay.
That's one.
Okay, interesting. I think that's a good proposition if there's nothing exactly like that out there. And
So we all are like university students. We all are living in a lifestyle where we don't value time much, and we only get value for the money we spend. So Zeros is a lifestyle program that enables people like who use our app to get value for the time. So what happens is we have a list of brands, shops, cafeterias, barber shops, everything. So what happens if you're on our app, every time you go there, you get value for your time, and you get points for the time you spend there, you get points back. And with these points, you can use it for online shopping, buying vouchers, spending at different places which are again partnered with us.
Just from time?
Just from time.
So if I had nothing better in my life to do, I'll just hang around these places.
So
get
what
points.
happens is you should be a customer at our branded place, like our partner places. So if you go to a cafeteria, say Philly, and you're having a tea from there, so normally what other people do is like they just keep their phone, they just do their work and they go off. So if they're going to get the value for the money, is they spend the tea for the money. But if if you're a person who is using our app, what happens is for the time you spend there with the phone, your phone is there, yeah? So you're not using it, you're using it, you'll get points for the time you spend there. So 15 to 20 minutes you spend, you get that points for that. And you go back home, you can buy, say, a new phone cover for your phone or something with that points.
Interesting. How do you monetize that?
So what happens is, because it's like a tech business, and what happens is our key matrices is number of users. So what we do right now is we give only basic option will be free. So you'll have like 3 shops for free and like limited amount of zeros to earn like that. And at the price point of 5 to 7 dirhams, we'll keep the premium subscription. What makes having a such small price makes people to like actually go forward to buying that purchase for like a subscription. And as our number of users increase day by day, and when we hit the proper key metrics like our mark, we can go and ask brands to pay us a monthly rent so that they can still stay up on our app.
Okay, interesting. Wow, good stuff. I wish you guys all the best of luck.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's been lovely to meet you all, and it was fun. Right.
Sir, also could you please give your contact details in case anyone wants to contact?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to write it and circulate it somewhere?
You're already sure.
Okay, I'll just write it here. You can circulate. I'll give you my email address if you like. that's the best place. So it's Bassem at the Astor Global Partners Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sushma. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Same here. Pleasure.